Hello, I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Friday, June 25th. We begin in Saskatchewan, where at least 750 unmarked graves have been found at the Cowessess Residential School. The discovery came soon after radar searches were conducted on the grounds earlier this month. Here with the story, Priscilla Wolfe.
We started our radar penetrating research on June the 2nd, 21. We have hit 751 unmarked graves.
Cowessess First Nation Chief Cadmus DeLorme says the graves belong to children connected to the Merivale Indian Residential School that operated in the community from 1899 to 1997.
This is not a mass grave site. These are unmarked graves.
The graveyard was run by the church until 1970, until it became a community cemetery taken over by the First Nation. Chief DeLorme says they plan to search and put names or at least headstones for each unmarked grave.
We didn't remove these headstones. Removing headstones is a crime in this country, and we are treating this like a crime scene at the moment. The oral stories of our elders, of our survivors, and friends of our survivors that knew these burials were here.
And I went to boarding school down there.
Elder Florence Sparvier, who is now 80, attended the Merivale Indian Residential School and says she is glad that the world is hearing the truth now and how our people were forced to attend these residential schools.
At that time, if the parents didn't want to allow their children to go to boarding school, one of them had to go to jail.
Sparvier says the residential schools stripped us of our Indigenous identity and made us feel ashamed of our culture and language.
When we became assimilated, they made us think different and feel different. It's a lot of the pain that we see in our people right now.
Chief Bobby Cameron of the FSIN says the churches need to hand over the record so we can identify these spirits that are being uncovered in unmarked graves.
We try to put ourselves in the eyes and the bodies of these children who are now being found in the ground, who have been waiting for decades to have a proper burial and to be honored properly amongst our own protocols, traditions, and customs. And a small First Nations voice said, "They found us. They found us."
Priscilla Wolfe, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Geraldine Shingoose attended the Muskowhegan Residential School in Saskatchewan from 1962 to 1971. She's had much to say about the recent confirmation of child graves at such institutions.
I was expecting more sites, but I didn't expect, this amount, very huge number. My initial response is I broke down. I cried for those children. I cried for the community. I cried for the survivors, myself, including as a survivor. It was a very emotional time. Myself, Vivian Ketchum, and Chickadee Richards were leaving on June 28th. We're delivering a Sacred Fire bundle. Winnipeg held a Sacred Fire here at the Manitoba Ledge for the 215 children. We're taking those ashes, the people's prayers, to Kamloops Residential School. We are caravanning. We want to offer our condolences. We want to offer our love and support from Treaty 1 territory. And along the way, we're stopping in Brandon. We're going to be stopping in Cowessess.
And a reminder, the National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors or anyone who may be in need of support. Their toll-free number, 1-866-925-4419. Meanwhile, the news coming out of Saskatchewan compelled two Manitoba Grand Chiefs to hold a joint press conference. Among those watching, Daryl Stranger.
Of course, we are all filled with sadness as we think about the people in Cowessess, Saskatchewan.
Leadership from Northern and Southern Manitoba Indigenous organizations joined together to share their thoughts on today's news from Saskatchewan. Southern Chiefs Organization Grand Chief Jerry Daniels said the news from Kamloops and Cowessess and those that will follow is of international importance.
I think it's important that the world reflects on what exactly happened here, because we are talking about genocide of a people, the killing of children, and then the hiding and denying of the truth. That is what the record shows as it relates to Canada in its treatment of Indigenous children over the last 200 some years.
MKO Grand Chief Garrison Satie echoed the same thoughts, saying Canada can no longer conceal what happened in these institutions.
We want the world to know that an atrocity was committed in this country, and this country was founded on assimilation policies that killed our people and killed our children in residential schools, and that Canada cannot go into the international community and try to chastise other people for injustices when the injustice that's committed on our land has not been addressed.
As for residential schools in Manitoba, the provincial government announced funding to investigate burial sites in the province. Daniel said the exact use of that money has yet to be determined, but families need to take the lead.
Residential schools, I think we had about 9 in southern Manitoba. And so we want to be able to get an idea of how many of our citizens had attended there and what records we do have.
Both Satie and Daniel said work will continue with families and First Nations to locate and find those lost loved ones, and that the work and healing needed is only just beginning. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
There's been a push for more searches at other school sites, and several provinces and the federal government have pledged almost $50 million towards those efforts. Putting up over half of those monies is the federal government, with Ontario pledging $10 million, Alberta $8 million, Saskatchewan $2.5 million, and Manitoba $2 million. British Columbia has committed no such funds to date, but officials say they're prepared to step up with more resources as needed. That's your APTN News Brief for Friday, June 25th. I'm Rick Harp.